All right, welcome everyone. We are live on Facebook, Rumble, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Telegram, and soon to be a few other platforms as well. So, welcome. We have a very special show for you tonight. We have the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. The head of that organization and the creator and founder is Cynthia Brown. I'm going to let her take over the conversation and begin from there and let her lead it. And, Cynthia, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your organization and how it got founded, and then segue from there.
Yes, my name is Cynthia Brown, and I'm the founder of the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. We actually got started in 2021. I founded it after my nephew was killed by Columbus police in 2017. He was shot 4 times. He was unarmed, and he was fearful for his life. We tried working with the Ohio General Assembly. We got nowhere. So we have exhausted all remedies. So we decided to put this on the ballot in 2021. For the last 3 years, we've been in a battle with the Ohio attorney, Dave Yost. With that being said, I want everybody to introduce themselves. We'll start with our very brilliant, young executive director, Kyle.l.Pierce.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm glad someone considers me young. I'm Kyle.l.Pierce. I've been with the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity since November 2022 when Cynthia brought me on as executive director. We have been through a lot. We have submitted time and time again a proposed summary and amendment to Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost. He has rejected our summary every time, except for the most recent one, which did not have a title with the petition, which was based on his unlawful rejection of our March 2024 submission based on it not having a title. The Ohio Supreme Court determined that he does not have the statutory authority to take a title into account when determining the fairness and truthfulness of the summary language. But that hasn't stopped him from breaking the law before, and I doubt the plain reading of any law is going to stop him from violating the law going forward either. We are in a federal case right now. We are suing the Attorney General for violation of our First Amendment rights. He has repeatedly prevented us from continuing to move forward in the petitioning process. We are now probably, I would say, over a year and a half beyond where we would have been had he not used his position as a unilateral, unreviewable gatekeeper to stop us from moving forward with the petitioning process. In this case, it's currently in the district court. If the district court, however, rules, the losing party will appeal to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, where we have won before against Yost. We're optimistic about it going forward, and we will be collecting starting in April the roughly 414,000 signatures required to get this on the ballot for the November 2025 election. With that, I will move it on. We have one of our committee members here, Jenny Sue, on the call.
Thank you, Kyle. My name is Jenny Sue Rowe, and I'm a committee member for Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. I'm also the new owner of our nonprofit organization, Veteran Rehab and Refuge, as our former leader, former founder, Army veteran Sean Rowe was executed by Richland County officers in our home. The last thing I ever imagined was being held at gunpoint and thrown into a jail cell for 6 days, but that was my reality after driving home from work one night. While I sat in the jail cell, my husband Sean, a proud new homeowner and an Army veteran, was left alone without a vehicle in a new town. He was frightened, abandoned, and desperate for help. He imagined that I had been kidnapped, and was imagining the worst. But Sean just wasn't any citizen. He was also a veteran who gave 8 years of his life for this country. He served in Iraq and Korea. He sacrificed so much only to be repaid with abandonment and betrayal by the very system that he served. Then the unthinkable happened. Over 20 officers, including a SWAT team and U.S. Marshals, descended on our home while I was in jail. They had set up a command post down the road. They brought a Bearcat and ran by our garage door, knocking the foundation beam out of place. It's a miracle that our house didn't collapse. After firing rounds of non-lethal tear gas and beanbags, one officer in the driveway fired a real bullet into our home window. From the drone footage above, you can actually see the flash bang as the bullet strikes the window. Sean knew the difference between non-lethal force and a real bullet. Obviously, he knew his life was in danger. He was done arguing with the officers, and now he was running for his life, searching for any cover. He stumbled over a patio chair and ran inside, where he was met by 4 officers from the ASORT team standing just 10 feet inside our doorway. Sean never had a gun. He had 2 swords. One sword fell to the ground as he ran inside, and the other remained in his lowered hand. 2 officers, Paul Webb and Rod Roos, fired 8 bullets into Sean's young body. One fired an AR-15 and the other one fired a Glock 40. I learned of Sean's death from a sheriff who pulled me into a jail hallway and told me the words that Sean was dead. I was so crazy. They threw me into isolation for 6 days where I was crying and screaming and moaning before a court ordered me to a crisis unit for 30 days. They refused to let me go home to check on my destroyed house that was left unsecured. Doors were wide open, garage door busted. There was the aftermath of broken glass and tear gas dust settling in every crevice. I later found out more truth in a body cam video where Captain Zahner was doing a walkthrough of my property and said that I had been arrested to keep me safe because they knew what they were going to do to Sean. After reviewing my arresting officers' body cams, I heard them discussing how my arrest had been terrible planning, bad positioning, and had they been on the other end of the road, I would have made it home. They knew exactly what they were doing. Even recently this year, I uncovered more truths where the search warrant that claimed Sean had an outstanding arrest warrant was totally fabricated. After obtaining public records, I learned there was never an arrest warrant. There wasn't one in 2021. There wasn't one in 2020. There was never an arrest warrant for Sean. This was all a total setup. This is what happens when law enforcement agencies operate without consequences. Officers can lie, escalate, and kill without accountability. If we do nothing now, how many more veterans and how many innocent people will suffer from this unchecked power? There's already people being shot in their kitchens, people being shot at traffic stops, people shot in their bedrooms, people shot unarmed on their property. Excessive use of force, arresting people face down in the streets and hearing their last words, "I can't breathe." All because of these officers' continual use of "I feared for my life" as an excuse to execute unarmed people. This excuse is being used too often. This isn't just a race issue. The kids are being shot, women are being shot, babies are being, I haven't heard of baby being shot, but babies are being, held while people are being arrested. This isn't just a poverty issue. Excessive force is run rampant, even as athletes in Miami are being forced face down on the ground. This isn't just an issue with officers. This is an issue with all government officials, including prosecutors, children's services, probate courts, and guardianships. The people's government officials need to be held to higher accountability standards. We need to demand accountability. We need to stand up and say enough is enough. If you want to learn more about Sean's dream, legacy, where he's putting veterans first, you can check out our website at veteranrehabandrefuge.org.
Thank you, Jenny Sue. Next, we'll have Allie come on and she'll share her story. She is our badass ambassador in Youngstown.
Thank you. My best. So, yeah, my mom, she was taken over in a fraudulent guardianship. It was forced and coerced in 2018. With strength, I don't think I ever mentioned this before, but in 2008, her primary care physician wanted her to be in guardianship way back in 2008. And he wanted to deem her incompetent then. And so I'm like, looking back on this, this is what they do to get you into their system so that they make the money. Because if she was really incompetent then and he was willing to make her or, deem her incompetent 10 years prior to when he did, then he had his eyes on this, way back then, right? So, my fundamental right to care for my own mother was taken from me. I wasn't even allowed to take her out to dinner. I wasn't allowed to take her to the Dairy Queen. They treated me like the criminal, and I have I have a federal background check. I'm a caregiver, and I've always had a federal background check. I've had, jobs where, I needed that. So they always want to defamate your character and try to make you look like the bad guy, but it kind of backfired on them. But so when I started looking into these people that had my mom and were holding her captive in a lockdown facility in a nursing home, I found this case, and it was from 2013, and it had to do with my mom's guardian at the time. Well, this case was from 2013, and it was a wrongful death lawsuit where this elderly man was forcibly removed from his home. And it's the same thing. The same people were involved. It was Job and Family Services. It was Adult Protective Services. It was the courts that basically took this man from his daughter and son-in-law's home, loving, caring home. He died shortly after. And so they sued all these organizations, the Job and Family Services, APS, and others. And they were protected by qualified immunity. So that's why I'm joining this team. And as you can see, we're all victims. We're all under attack on so many different levels. Why is that? These people are getting funding. They're using our tax dollars, and we're paying for our own abuse and demise, and we need to stop it. It's got to stop. So that's why I'm here. So
thank you, Allie.
Yeah.
Next, we'll hear from our newest colleague partner, Tony.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on. My name is Tony Viola. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. My colleagues and I built a fantastic real estate company. We had over 150 colleagues until one day, the FBI and the county prosecutor and the Justice Department kicked the door in and said that I stole $46 million from a mortgage company, a nation's largest mortgage fraud scam. The problem was I didn't own a mortgage company, nothing to do with mortgages, and I never got a cent. So when law enforcement makes a mistake, did they just say, sorry, Tony? No. This is a prosecutorial crime spree. I was indicted in federal court and state court. I was convicted at a first trial, exonerated later, 10 years in prison. These guys knew I was innocent the whole time. And let me just tell you one of the reasons why I believe in this cause of qualified immunity. If these guys thought that they would be held accountable for their actions, they wouldn't do it. You wouldn't have all these wrongful convictions. Let me just give you a snippet of what happens when there's no accountability. Dan Caceres, the senior assistant Ohio Attorney General for Dave Yost, okay, Caceres was having an affair with a government witness who testified in 36 cases and gave her undisclosed money. We have admissions by both the Justice Department and the FBI that they lied about evidence in my case. Can you imagine? They go to court, hey, we lied, ignore everything we said. They let me out of jail, but they didn't want to throw the initial conviction out. We're still litigating this for 5 years. No accountability. I spoke up in court. I said to the judge, why don't we have a hearing about how do you not produce evidence? No, calm down. I was told I was too riled up. We got Dan Caceres using a private email account on his Yahoo to communicate with these government witnesses. By the way, he's continuously used his authority as a prosecutor to solicit sex from government witnesses, including Kelly Connors down in Youngstown and Catherine Clover up in Cleveland, Ohio, and a whole bunch of other people. We have the nation's largest mortgage fraud case. We had SWAT teams, we had guns, media was there. And then guess what? Mark Bennett and Dan Caceres, the two prosecutors, they came to court one day and they said, oh, fiddlesticks, we lost the computers from the companies I don't own, right? So I can't defend myself. They went and raided all these companies, and then they claimed to lose evidence. It turned out that they destroyed evidence. But the most outrageous thing about my case was, instead of law enforcement just saying, all right, we made a mistake, they won't do it. They took their office manager, a young lady named Dawn Pacella, justicefordawn.com. They had Dawn pretending to be a paralegal and helping defense attorneys with their cases so that Dawn could record people's trial preparation and find out our witnesses. Now, this is a crime, okay? And what if I bugged the prosecutor's office? Would that be okay? Could I just bug their conference room? Man, I'd love to hear what they're saying. No, but I was indicted. So when the government wants to talk to you, they got to bring you down to the U.S. Attorney's office or the prosecutor's office, and you go with your lawyer. I was indicted. They said they wouldn't meet with us because I was a target of the investigation. They had Dawn wearing a wire, befriending me under false pretenses. Now, she's aware that these prosecutors, Bennett and Caceres, are hiding evidence inside the prosecutor's office. She was 23 years old when they had her start wearing a wire. My case dragged on for 3 years, partially because of these supposedly missing computers. Well, Dawn starts becoming aware that there's a lot of innocent people going to prison, okay? And she decided not to be a part of it anymore. And she came forward and told me, Tony, there's a lot of misconduct in here, and I apologize, and I wasn't really this paralegal that was helping you, and I work for the prosecutors. And then she started giving me evidence that the government said didn't exist. That's how I was exonerated at my second trial. Meanwhile, she's supposed to testify. She's found dead under suspicious circumstances. Parma, Ohio, which is a total cesspool in Cuyahoga County. They're all buddies with Dan Caceres and Mark Bennett, and they all hang out with each other. And the safety director, Bob Corey, used to be the #2 guy in the prosecutor's office. Anyway, this girl is found dead in her apartment. There's 3 cell phones near her body, one with an outbound call, supposedly 12 hours after she died. What do the police do? They don't collect the evidence. There's cameras in the building. No, we didn't get the camera footage. Her computer is missing with all the evidence. No, we don't know where that is. So this is a good old-fashioned government cover-up. And the reason that these people feel invincible and can do whatever they want to whoever they want for as long as they want is this immunity nonsense, even when they're caught. And by the way, in our case, because Dawn worked for them, she cleaned out their office. We've got all kinds of crazy emails. Our best evidence of wrongdoing by Bennett and Caceres, and Yost, really, because he's been named in some of this litigation, is their own records, their own words, their own emails. They're sending emails about altering documents inside the prosecutor's office. These people should all be arrested and imprisoned. Well, why aren't they? Because they're immune. So you can either have immunity or you can have justice, but not both. And I would say 2 last things. One is wrongful convictions are not some mistake. You know, like this Ohio Innocence Project with this guy, Mark Godsey, is a joke. He is a former prosecutor. He wants people to think, well, the witness screwed up and they saw the wrong guy, you know, coming out of the store with the gun. Nonsense. These wrongful convictions are a totally misconduct by prosecutors that start with a conclusion and never veer, no matter what happens. They suppress and destroy evidence that doesn't comport with their theory. And then the final cherry on top is when these wrongful conviction folks get these payouts. Here's $10 million. Sorry, we ruined your company and put you in jail for 10 or 20 years because we didn't feel like following the law. Here's 10 million. Who pays that money? The taxpayers. It is a scam. These people need to lose their pension when they shoot people and hide evidence and alter documents and destroy evidence. And it is just a injustice factory up here in Cuyahoga County with this nonsense. So I am fired up to help. I think this is a great organization. I salute everyone. Even though we have different stories, we're all victims of this ridiculous abuse of power that will continue. It is not going to stop, okay, until the immunity from these people is taken away and they go to jail. And that will solve this problem. We want to get, in fact, there's a petition on change.org with 7,000 signatures to indict Mark Bennett and Dan Caceres. Let's haul these people to jail and see how they like it. That'll stop it. So anyway, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate it. To learn more, you can check out justicefordawn.com. got a Facebook group. We've got a change.org petition. If you want to read about the prosecutorial crime spree, in my case, it's all documented on freetonyviola.com. You can read the court filings where the government says they were unaware of their own records and their own files. We're shipping all these people to prison, and oh shucks, we don't know what evidence we have. So anyway, thanks for letting me rant, and I'm fired up to be part of this group. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Tony. I want to go back to Kyle for a question real quick. Kyle, can you please explain to our audience again the next steps and how people can get involved if they want to help the coalition?
Yes, and like Tony pointed out, and like Kylie mentioned, these people, when you try to hold them accountable for violating your rights, for absolutely acting unlawfully, they get these immunities. Prosecutorial immunity, that's an absolute immunity. You can never sue in the civil courts a prosecutor for any actions they undertake in their prosecutorial capacity. Now, qualified immunity, you can kind of get around that if you find a case that's pretty much exactly like the case you're trying to bring, in which someone else has already won against the government. So, for instance, there was a man who was in jail. He was standing in his cell, and he was not provoking anyone, and he was pepper sprayed by the corrections officers just standing in his cell. He went to sue them, and the case that he referenced, in which someone had already won their case against the government, did not qualify for what is declared clearly established law, because in that instance, the person who was attacked unprovoked by the government corrections officer was tased in their cell, not pepper sprayed. So there's a whole world of difference, apparently, in the eyes of the courts between even that kind of minuscule difference. So it is almost impossible to get around qualified immunity. If these immunities didn't exist, we wouldn't see, we probably wouldn't see Tony in the situation he's in, because that Dan Kasarik would have been held to account a long time ago, decades ago. Dawn may still be with us today. She may still be alive. That's justicefordawn.com. That's when a person loses their life to the government, that's the most egregious offense I believe it can take upon us. Dawn saw that, Sean Rowe saw that in the premeditated attack on his life. Allie's mom saw that in the shortening of her life through a diminished quality of life and being held captive away from her family and her loved ones. This amendment would get rid of qualified immunity. It would get rid of prosecutorial immunity. It would get rid of sovereign immunity, which is the immunity that the governor, the attorney general, the secretary of state, all the executive state offices have. And it would get rid of all the immunities that they've written for themselves into Ohio law. And not only that, it would help to address these systemic issues that allow these rights violations to keep happening over and over and over again, through the provision that states that if someone wins their case in the civil courts against the government because of the actions of that government actor, then the court would order that government body to take, quote, reasonable measures to prevent a similar rights violation from reoccurring. So as people win their cases, we'll address the institutional sickness that is absolutely throwing our rights into the garbage. We need to get these roughly 800,000 raw signatures by July 2nd, 2025, to get this on the ballot. We need funding to do so. If you're able to donate, fantastic. Go to oceqi.org. We also need volunteers. If you can dedicate your time to helping something like this get on the ballot and helping to prevent stories like this that we've heard, or at least to hold people to account when they do violate our rights, please sign up to volunteer, again, at oceqi.org. So thankful to, we meet so many amazing people along the way.
We do.
Yes. And, I know Luann, Danielle, David, they're here. We haven't yet heard from them.
Robin.
Robin too. Yes, yes.
Okay, last question for Kyle. How many states have already ended qualified immunity to your knowledge? How many states have ended qualified immunity on a state level?
So on a state level, I believe I'll say 3.5. And here's why. So New Mexico and Colorado, they ended it through their General Assembly. Cynthia and the Ohio Coalition in Qualified Immunity and Accountability Now Ohio have tried to get something similar introduced into the Ohio General Assembly, and there's just no appetite on the part of our legislators to hold anybody accountable in the state of Ohio. So Colorado, New Mexico, they ended it through their General Assembly. Nevada has a fantastic Supreme Court. They made a unanimous ruling that qualified immunity does not apply in the state of Nevada. It is unconstitutional. We haven't seen other states follow that suit. And then Montana has a constitutional provision that prevents immunities from being applied for very specific instances. And I think it's something to do with tax law and very specific. And then at a more local level, New York City has ended qualified immunity for police officers. And I believe that's about it. I know Vermont had a government committee that was going to look into what the effects of ending qualified immunity would be, but they never followed through, at least not to my knowledge.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Danielle, you want to have anything to say?
I completely agree. It's just gone overboard and something has to be done. I mean, aside from, the stories where y'all are speaking of, these horrific crimes being committed, you also, once you get into the family court aspects of it, you got CPS and family courts working together with corrupt attorneys, and it's all, financially incentivized. So they're, wanting these big fancy paybacks, and it has just destroyed so many families' lives, and something has to give. We have to be able to have some sort of accountability for these people. They're breaking the law. And when you stop to think about it, these are the people that, they're in charge of all of this. Like, they should be held to a much higher standard than your average everyday person. They've had the education, they've had the training, they've taken the oaths. Those are things that should be, the oath alone should be taken very seriously. So for them to be able to just turn around and break the law whenever they want and they get away with it, what kind of standard or what kind of precedence does that set? And it's time for change. Definitely time for change. Something's got to give.
All right, back to Tony. Tony, do you know how many men and women have been released from prison from being wrongfully accused? I know Cleveland is in the top 10 of men being, released, let's say through the Innocent Project. Do you know the number exactly?
Well, there's dozens, but the problem is, as you guys know, the courts dilly around for years to make rulings. The dichotomy between when they were prosecuting me, we had a lot of enthusiasm. We had televised raids and guns and SWAT teams. We had pontoon boats in the Cuyahoga River, lest we swim to Canada, apparently. All this nonsense. And then, and we never missed court. We had court the day before Thanksgiving, and I got sentenced on January 2nd. Happy New Year from federal judge Don Nugent. So, but then now, after the government admitted lying about evidence, this is the 6th year of litigation because they don't feel like doing it. Courts don't respond. So part of it is they run out the clock. And then unless you have a sentence of 15 or 20 or 30 years, it's sad to say, but a lot of people just give up. I sat in the jail law library and guys had meritorious claims and they just gave up because the clock ran out. So the answer is there's dozens. The courts don't want to do it. Courts don't want to throw it out. They do what they want. The best example is like a situation like abortion. If you're a pro-life judge you're going to find case law that supports your theory. And if you're a pro-choice judge, you're going to find case law that supports your theory. That mifepristone, there was like opposite rulings by these different judges. So we have an outcomes-based judiciary. Anybody who thinks we have the rule of law is just misled. It's not true. So the answer is, in many of these cases, when they know there's a wrongful conviction, or they know the inmate has a good claim, or the lawyer brings a good claim, years before there's answers and it runs out the clock. The best estimates are that between 5 and 15% of the prisoners are actually wrongfully convicted or so dramatically over-sentenced. You know, there's an over-sentencing issue too, where a cooperator gets 30 days in jail and the target of the investigation gets 50 years. I mean, like, that is allowed. Just like there's prosecutorial immunity, there's prosecutorial discretion that has no boundary. It basically means they do what they want. So we are an epicenter of wrongful convictions. And let me just give you a quick story in Cuyahoga County. This O'Malley, who's the prosecutor who claims to be this great reformer, he brought a pretty respected judge named Ronald Adrian in to run a wrongful conviction unit within the prosecutor's office here. And Judge Adrian hired some top, students and put together a real committee actually looking into this stuff. And they found there was a lot of wrongdoing, and they found instances where there was evidence that wasn't turned over. And what happened? They terminated. He ended up resigning. They canceled it. So we want wrongful conviction committees for window dressing, so the public thinks court is fair and that there's a mechanism to go to. But it doesn't actually happen. So I know we've had dozens of people. Our lawyer in Cleveland, Kim Corral, she's walked a good number of people out of the prison. And again, all misconduct, all because we didn't feel like turning over the evidence. On the there's a national exoneration registry. I think there's thousands of people on that actually have had a court overturn the conviction. One last thing is the government doesn't like to overturn convictions. So they sometimes will let people out of prison, but say, but you have to plead to a lesser charge, sign this, don't sue us. And you're basically coerced as a prisoner. So, I mean, there's thousands of examples of that where the conviction is vacated, but they said, well, we're not going to put you on trial again. You can leave, but sign here. So there's no justice at all, and the courts don't want to hear it. Most of the judges are former prosecutors. They don't want to hear about wrongful convictions. And so the last thing is that they just defer. Well, we defer to the trial court. We weren't there. This is 10 years later. I'm an appeals judge. We presume the presumption. If you have a presumption, that means that you usually win, and the prosecutors get the presumption that it's true. The lawyers presume to have done an efficient and effective, constitutionally adequate job. So then in federal court and state courts too, there's all these presumptions. It's like starting a football game with being 200 points behind before the game starts.
Wow. Okay, does anyone have any questions that we'd like to ask? Tony, Jenny,
I have a
Allie?
question.
Good.
If they're saying that if they're outside of their job description and they commit, like, they do something, like, I don't know how to word this, but basically if they're doing their job and they like shoot someone and they're doing their job, then the qualified immunity applies. But if they're not doing their job, it doesn't apply. So how are they getting away with this when we have so much evidence? Do you know?
Are you asking me?
Well, yeah, whoever you.
Oh, I know. There's two reasons why. One, there's a Supreme Court case called Heck versus Humphrey, which says that you cannot use civil litigation to overturn a criminal conviction. So anytime I've raised some of these issues, oh no, you can't do this. You have to go back to your sentencing court. You can't raise these ancillary issues of constitutional. So part of it is they slam the door in your face. The other thing is the judges do whatever they want. This is exactly the argument we made. What's a prosecutor's job? A prosecutor's job is to present a case in court or negotiate a plea agreement. So I'm saying when Dan Caceres is having sex with a witness in the Pinecrest apartments in North Royalton because his wife threw him out, that's not part of his job. Okay, but denied. You can't do this, Tony. It's insulting. You can't say this. And so the answer is, if the judge followed the law, they would say that having sex with a government witness and stealing money from the evidence room, which Dawn, told me about all this, and giving it to the witness and not disclosing it, which is called a Giglio violation, that's not his job. The other thing that the prosecutors do is they veer into an investigative role. The prosecutors are not supposed to be interviewing witnesses and tagging along. That's what a policeman is, or a detective, or the FBI is supposed to do. But they do whatever they want. And so you're right when you say that's what the standard is, the legal law is, that if if a guy just in good faith brings a case in court and the jury rules that the defendant is not guilty, that doesn't necessarily mean that the prosecutor did anything wrong. But when you make these allegations and you attach the emails or you attach these documents, the judges just don't want to hear it. So it's like making a 3-year-old eat spinach if there's a big pile of ice cream there. Like the judges don't want to offend or upset prosecutors. They were prosecutors in Cleveland. The U.S. attorney is on the 4th floor of this federal building, and the judges are upstairs. You go to like Don Nugent, they were a prosecutor, then they got promoted. They pack up their desk, they go upstairs to the 15th, 16th floor, and they're all in the same building together. They don't want to rule for me. They don't want to rule. They go to lunch, they play poker, they hang out, they go to what's it, polo with the horse when they're playing, got the thing on the horse. They go to their talk. I got emails where they're talking about this. Don Nugent's going to go and hang out with Mark Bennett and Jay Milano. They're going to go to watch the horses. I'm sitting in a jail cell. So, they do not follow the law. That is what's supposed to happen. A prosecutor is supposed to, or a policeman or whatever, they're supposed to lose their immunity if they're not doing what's their lawful job.
So Dan Caceres, I actually talked to him about my mom's case, and he did nothing. I talked to Yost at the Green Eagle Tavern. I saw him at a fundraiser for, political fundraiser. Nothing. I went to the Department of Health. Nothing. Like all of these organizations do nothing. All of these departments, nothing. So we're all just under attack. We're at war. Our government's attacking us. We're paying for our own abuse. Like what can we do here with putting a stop to this? Because we're not going to win in the courts. There's got to be something we can do outside the box, but this is what we're dealt with right now to get the signatures, 800,000 signatures. So we'll try this, but we can also do things outside the box too. So we'll have to come up with that. We won't tell them our game plan.
Thing that happened with Sean, and I tried to get accountability for the Richland County Sheriffs, and you can't get any accountability for county sheriffs. I tried the mayor in Mansfield, and she has jurisdiction over Mansfield police, but nobody has jurisdiction over county police. I tried calling Senator Brown. I called Mike DeWine. They have no jurisdiction over any police officer or any elected official. So the sheriff, they have no jurisdiction over an elected official in Ohio. I contacted the FBI, and as soon as they hear that police shot someone, they hang up the phone. I called them back 4 times. Every time they're like, "Who shot your husband?" I said, Rod Roos and Paul Webb, they're Richland County sheriffs. Hang up the phone every single time. I've written letters, and nobody wants to hold anybody accountable. Nobody wants to do anything. It's really disgusting.
Mm-hmm. It is disgusting.
And besides that, trying to get my house fixed, the officers did $100,000 worth of damage to my house. And so I went to the Victim Compensation Fund. You get to go down to Columbus and have a hearing with Attorney General Dave Yost. And so their attorney down there, I forget her name, but she said I needed to have a police report done. So, because I didn't have a police report done, so we went back, and I have all this evidence. I have so much evidence. I got pictures, I got documents, I got so much evidence. So I come back and I tell Captain Zahner that I need to have a police report done on my house so that I can go back and appeal the victim compensation. And he said that he's not going to do a police report because there's a giant BCI report, which is huge. You can't even send a file to anybody. It's hundreds of pages, with including all the witnesses and everything. The BCI report is so big, and it documents all the damage that was done in my house. So Captain Zahner refused to do a police report. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to appeal this anyway. So I appeal, file my appeal, go back to Columbus into the Supreme Court there and tell them I can't get a police report because there's this huge BCI report. And no, you have to have the police report from the county. You had to have called and said you needed a police report, like when your house was blowed up. And so nobody will take accountability for the $100,000 for the damages to my house. And in the last 3 years, I have had no heat in my house. And if you think that doesn't make a person insane, try living with 44 degrees inside your house and your dog water bowl is freezing, and it just is maddening. And just to know that these police are out there in their warm houses, snuggling their wives, hugging their kids, and going to work every day and still living the same exact lives, and all of our people are dead. And it's just disgusting.
Terrible. That's terrible. How can they not file I mean, I would like to talk to this sheriff or whoever that's denying you their job. That's their job to do a criminal complaint report or a police report. That's their job. Like that makes sense.
Now, Captain Donald Zahner, a year after the incident, was fired. So there's a small piece of justice there. And he was hired now at the next county over, Ashland County Prosecutor's Office hired him as a detective. So he still gets to walk around with his gun and play games. And he's had other instances with Detective Massey that works in Richland County, where they have gone to houses in Shelby and done other crime scenes, and things have come up missing, and they've never made it to the whatever, where they put the evidence room. They've never made it to the evidence room. And Massey will go back, Detective Massey will go back after everybody's said and done and gone for the day. He'll go back the next day, is what he did in my house, came back, and even on record on his body cam today, when I heard Zahner saying that he had arrested me to keep me safe. Later on in the video, he says, asking somebody at my house, do you know where she kept her jewels and money?
Wow.
Now, why is that necessary information for a murder?
Right. They're thieves. That's what they do. They steal everything that you have. They leave you with nothing. That's what they do. I've seen
They
it.
get away with it. That's why they keep doing it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Does
Jenny?
anybody else have
Go.
any more questions for our panel?
This is Loanne Fleming from the Probate Trap, Robin Austin from the Probate Trap. I wanted to ask Kyle, you said Colorado doesn't have qualified immunity, or what did you mean by that?
So Colorado has ended qualified immunity, at least for police officers. Their change in law allows for up to $25,000 of any compensation to be paid out by the government agent. And then the government will indemnify the rest of that. But you look at, there was a study done by Joanna C. Schwartz out of UCLA. She's one of the foremost experts in the nation on qualified immunity. She did a study of dozens of cities and cases where there have been payouts to individuals based on the wrongdoings of government actors. And her study found that in over 99.8% of these cases, the government's paying out anyways. So Colorado has an unqualified immunity for officers, at least, where the officers can be held accountable to a certain degree personally. That's unlike New Mexico, where the government itself is fully liable, not the government actor, the actual government employee. And our amendment takes that same approach just because, there's already indemnification in over 99.8% of these cases.
Wow.
Wow.
And there's been no negative effect on police recruitment in these states. There's been no negative effect on retention. There's been no negative effect on public safety. All these boogeymen that, you know, people opposed to ending qualified immunity talk about has not happened where it's been ended. So it's all just scare tactics, because that's all they have left. They have nothing to stand on.
Wow.
Wow. Well, one of the things that is obviously of concern to us, our website and our upcoming book are both titled The Probate Trap. And one of the problems that we see is the immunity that is exercised by individuals who are under court authority. Once a judge authorizes someone to do something, it doesn't matter whether that would be a criminal act if it were done by an ordinary citizen or not. It's all good. And that's the kind of qualified immunity that we see coming out of the probate courts. And that's sort of, it's all part of the whole panorama of immunity granted by governmental agencies. And if we may be able to address it with the police, address it with this, address it with that, but it's something that we really need to be focused in a way that we have a very broad focus to try to end qualified immunity all the way to judges who misuse their authority and commit crimes from the bench. And because they're judges, no one ever does anything about it or addresses it. And all those who are operating under the authority of a judge who also commit crimes and simply get away with it because a judge has authorized that behavior. So this is a huge problem that has to do with every area of our government. And that is what brought us into the circle of the Ohio Coalition to end qualified immunity, because it is a branch of this octopus that we've really got to get rid of.
100% agree.
I fully agree as well.
I got a question, you guys.
Sure.
How long have you had this organization been, as it is today, and how much longer do you anticipate that fighting this fight in order to get some actual lasting change that's effective, that where you don't have to come back in and keep doing this kind of advocacy work? Because obviously the whole reason we're all doing this is because the corruption is so bad, right? How long do you think it will be before we get some sort of accountability, if at all?
Kyle, I'll let you answer that question, please.
Let's see. The accountability in Ohio Now was the precursor to the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. It was founded in 2021, Cynthia, is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yes. And then the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity was formalized in 2022. And, we're going to see this through. We're going to get this amendment passed in Ohio. There's too many people. There are too many lives this affects. Government is so unlawfully out of control. And after we pass it in Ohio, who knows? There are at least a dozen other states where they can petition to get a change to their state constitution on the ballot. If they feel so inspired and if they seek out, guidance, I don't know of anyone involved in this petition movement who would not want to at least give advice or help with guiding those other movements. And there has been interest expressed, at least from Florida. I know there's a group who's interested in this, and we would hope to inspire other states along the way. We would be the first in the nation to end qualified immunity this way, through the ballot.
Kyle, I see the same thing going on all around the country with a lot of these advocacy groups, like what you're doing. There's others in other states, and very similar in nature. Different names, different. Of course, because state laws are different in each state. So it's very somewhat. But I've noticed that as we're coming together as organizations and networks, all pushing all resources together to expose the corruption that's going on, I see a renaissance in information, I think, and exposure of corruption moving forward. What do you think about that? I see it clear as day moving forward, just from what I'm doing and what I see everybody else do.
Oh, absolutely. Especially as we, share the techniques we each use to uncover the information that shows the corruption happening. I know I love the public records requests here in Ohio, Freedom of Information Act requests. Tony worked with Don on the inside, who was, gave an actual inside view, unredacted, like they like to do in these FOIAs and public records requests. I'm sure everyone else on here can talk about the information gathering tools or methods they use to really show this corruption that's going on.
Oh yeah, no, the information technology and how far it's progressed, and the ability for just regular everyday people to go on the internet and look up public domain sources such as C-SPAN, for example, or other public domain information that's public knowledge or public domain, like finances, for example, for politicians and leaders. Most people don't realize a lot of those records are public domain. It's funny how much you can start to connect when you go and actually realize that they are, and start showing people out there, and like, look, I can prove it here. Boom, boom, boom. I don't even got to pay for anything. Just go online. And a lot of the times that's the case. I mean, I basically built News4us to expose the public domain facts that we could prove, and so from that foundation, I think there's a good moving step forward. But I think it says a lot about the era that we're in. What do you think about that, you guys?
Tony, you want to add your opinion?
Sure. I mean, I'll give you some public records stuff. I mean, first of all, yes, anybody fighting their case should be doing records requests all over the place, federal, state, local. Ohio actually has, from a different era, really decent public records laws. Part of the benefit is the government, especially with these government cover-ups and criminality, one hand doesn't know what the other is doing. So just a quick story. So I was prosecuted in federal court and state court, and for 10 years, the U.S. attorney in Cleveland said, Tony made up this stuff with Dawn. She never had any access to federal evidence. So she couldn't have given Tony this exonerating evidence. This is BS. He should stay in jail. And then as that was going on and they kept lying in these court filings, we kept getting receipts that the FBI brought 38 boxes of evidence over to the task force before my first trial. And so what happened was, in our case, the government's own statements, because they'll lie or say anything, are contradicted by what? Their own records. I mean, there's nothing that I can say that's better than their own records. So you can destroy the government's statements or even criminal cases or their actions a lot of times with their own documents.
Their own admissions. That's the best kind of evidence there is.
Right, but part of the thing is these prosecutors feel invincible, so they leave a paper trail of their criminality. I mean, they do crazy stuff in writing. And
a huge one, mind you, at this point, from what I've seen, a huge paper trail.
There's a huge paper trail, and money leaves a paper trail. So like Dan Caceres, we've got him forging a deed. There's something called Caceres Properties in the Caceres Family Trust. Isn't that nice? And people that they prosecuted, their houses ended up in Dan Caceres's personal family trust. So look, the guy's a criminal. But the thing is that, real estate, there's deeds and there's mortgages, and all this leaves a trail. And so if you dig deep enough, and even some probate situations where you go in, you dress half nice, you bring a roll of quarters or whatever, and you go and ask for a file, they'll give it to you. If you go to a clerk's office or a lot of times they'll say, yeah, you can look through it right here, stand here, and you pull out the document you want, you make copies and go. So even grand jury stuff, which you're supposedly not supposed to get, one of our private investigators told me that they were able to just ask for it. Oh, sure, here. So the part of it is the government is so big and they don't always know what's going on. A lot of times the record officials, it's a low-level job. And so some clerk, types in Tony Viola or Don Pasella, hits print, and all this stuff comes out. Meanwhile, Mark Bennett and Dan Caceres are trying to cover that up or hide it, and they didn't produce it. So yes, the answer is if you stay with it, you can unearth a lot. The other thing, lastly, on records, which is crazy, but if the same person makes the exact same records request, and then a month later, a different person copies the exact same request, you can get different records. You can actually get different materials. So the government doesn't know what they're doing. And depending on who is drinking coffee and listening to or watching TikTok videos while they're working in the government, you can actually get quite a lot of stuff. So there's another tip. Have different people make the records. The Ohio Court of Claims, it's $25. You can get on a phone call with a magistrate, and even if the government is lying, which they do, make them put it in writing. Make them say in writing, it doesn't matter that Dawn Pasella died during my trial. Go ahead. Or that the witness was lying and it's cool. So I would encourage anyone fighting to do just what Stephen said, which is to dig deep into these government offices. Generally, but not always, the person filling the records request doesn't know anything about the matter in question. So it's helpful.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you,
very
Tony.
knowledgeable there, man. You got a lot more knowledge than I do. I have a couple questions. I'd like to pick your brain one of these days.
Anytime. I was just putting in the group chat. Anytime, Stephen. My contact info was in the chat earlier.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it.
Are there any additional questions for the panel?
Go ahead. I have another question. So how long you have to get signatures, right? 800,000 signatures. Do you have a concept on doing that, or what can you do about that? I mean, I know that's a lot you got to do. What can
What's
you
the
do?
amount they need to get again? How much?
800,000 raw signatures, which will around 800,000 raw signatures. We're looking for between 700,000 and 1 million raw signatures, because we have to get 413,488 valid signatures by July 1st or July 2nd, pardon me, to get it on the November 2025 ballot. So there are petitioning companies that will actually,
What
contract
was the
out
due date on that again? I'm taking notes. Go ahead. I apologize.
July 2nd is the deadline for petition signatures.
Thank you.
And there are these paid petitioning companies in Ohio where, typically organizations like us will contract out a certain portion of the signatures as being paid signatures. Those are anywhere from, 60 to 90% paid petitioning for typical ballot initiatives here in Ohio. We expect to contract out several of those because we're going to need to cover vast areas of the state in a small amount of time, which is why our fundraising goal for this initial phase, for the signature collection phase, is about $10 million. That will allow us to get those signatures in that short amount of time. The cost of a signature has gone up from when I was petitioning in 2018. I've been a circulator myself. Signatures would go for between $5 to $8 a piece. Now they're going for anywhere from $8 to $15 a signature. Luckily, we don't have any competing initiatives going on, so there won't be, 5 different organizations trying to all have the same circulation company doing this. But we also anticipate about 10 to 30% of our signatures coming from volunteer efforts, just because this impacts almost everyone in the state of Ohio. And if it doesn't, you at least know somebody who it impacts. So I hope that answered the question on that.
Yes. Wow. That's a lot of signatures still, and a lot of commitment. I'm glad that you were all very well committed to doing that. And I like to get something like that here in Colorado for other ballots as well, ballot initiatives.
I mean, you guys
I think it's the only way that you could really go past all the legislators and all that. You know what I mean? Because they made it so high in Colorado for you to do any ballot initiatives. It's ridiculous. I mean, they made it that hard because of the marijuana that they did at one time. They like doubled and tripled the signatures you have to get now because of that.
Wow.
Yeah. It's awful.
Yeah, the legislators didn't like the people exercising their authority instead of them being in charge themselves. The legislators were like, we've got to do something about this. What are we going to do? So they put together a bill that made it more difficult for the signatures that are needed to be gathered, and set the bar much higher, just to make it more difficult, because they didn't want the people exercising their will and changing things, and the control not to be in their own hands. And that's, I think, probably a hazard that is probably going to be faced, or is being faced, by people all over the nation, because that's, we're dealing with people that are entrenched in their practices, and oftentimes those practices are corrupt. But even if they're just looking at the whole control and power scenario that they enjoy, they don't want to give up any of it, and they'd rather have the power than have it in the hands of the people. And so it's that's what you're facing now is a high bar, but it could be worse, and I'm sure there are those that will strive to make it worse if they can.
Absolutely. They tried here in Ohio, but it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so when do you have to start the whole process? When is that? Next month? Does it start?
April, we will definitely be collecting signatures.
On the ground.
Yes.
Wow. That's coming up real quick.
It is. We are sprinting a marathon every single day.
Mm-hmm.
We are putting in every effort to make sure we can get this on the ballot. And so Ohio can choose to have accountability in our government.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I hope you all have success. We'll have to have you back on the probate trap and News4us World too, to let us know how you're doing and see if we can get some more help for you too.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. We should have you. We should have you guys on as regularly. I think everybody that we're doing, putting their show out there, putting their information out there, we should do it regularly, like every so often. It helps with the algorithm. One, it'll help expand our networks and just go from there. So,
right,
absolutely, I love being on here with you guys.
And of course, our audiences dovetail perfectly, because we're all dealing with the fact that there is corruption in all throughout our government, and how it affects the people, and what we can do to address it. And so our audience is going to be interested in what this is, which is what brings us here. And so is Stephen's, and so are yours, interested in the kind of things that we're covering. So all of these things dovetail nicely, and it helps us all to broaden our reach and accomplish more.
Yeah, right. And I also have a question for Tony, if you don't mind. You said you're in jail for 10 years. Did you get any reimbursement or anything from the government?
No. So right now they won't throw my conviction out. So they fired the federal prosecutor. They said they lied about evidence. They let me out of jail 3 years early, but they won't actually vacate the conviction, because they know that if they vacate the conviction, then it's going to be a circus, because not only is there going to be huge costs to that, but there's 1,200 other people. You got to remember, my case is not a DNA case. It's not like, oh, gee, Tony didn't rape this young lady. It's this other guy over here. This task force that went after it, mortgage fraud task force, prosecuted 1,200 realtors, people who sold property, people who are just trying to buy a rental house. Oh my God, you tricked the bank. You bought a house, no money down. That's a crime. So they know. And I've said, listen, right when our company was being raided, I went on TV. They were arresting me and taking our computers. And I told everybody that the U.S. attorney can stick this indictment, where. I mean, I've said this right as this started. And so they know that I'm the guy that is not going to bend. They did a lot of illegal things. I want to drive accountability. I can't get my real estate business back. I can't get the time I was in prison back. But do I want a check for $10 million from the government? So what am I going to do? Go buy a yacht? What am I going to do? In Cleveland, Ohio, drive a Bentley? Is that what I should do? I mean, this has to stop. I was successful. I made money before. I just want the government to leave me alone. And the scarier thing, and I think this is the common theme, it's not that there's rogue prosecutors. There's bad everybody. There's bad firemen. There's bad teachers. I mean, the issue is the government refuses to correct these blatant injustices.
It's the refusal to address them. That's the issue.
They won't do it. And by the way, earlier there was this
100%.
Concept of jurisdiction. They don't have jurisdiction. They don't have jurisdiction because they don't want to have it. Okay, if I would steal
exactly, they don't want it. It's not that they don't have it; they just don't.
That's right. if I steal a candy bar in Detroit and drive to Cleveland and I get arrested, if the federal government wants to say, well, you cross state lines, it's interstate commerce, you're getting prosecuted in federal court, they'll do it if they want to do it. So just remember that.
Wow.
They do what they want to do, and everybody else's rights be damned. I mean, I know myself, I've had very much similar experience and was unjustly thrown through a railroad case myself. So I know very much all too well how these courts and these corrupt, these, I don't even want to call them judicial because they're really not. I mean, they're just corrupt as all hell, and there's no due process. But I can totally relate to where you're coming from, Tony.
Well, and the last thing is that remember, there's what you call the friendly bureaucrat. I mean, that's what Jenny was talking
that's the worst.
about.
That's the worst kind.
The friendly bureaucrat. Oh,
Especially with the special interests.
I didn't shoot you, or I didn't shoot your kid. I'm sorry
Right.
this happened to you, but there's nothing I can do. I mean, this friendly bureaucrat.
It's
Gee,
the
Tony, I'm
conven-
sorry
excuse
this
the
happened, but I
plausible
didn't prosecute you.
deniability. Yep.
Nobody wants to exercise any authority to do the right thing. Part of the problem is we have a dictatorship of bureaucrats in this country.
You're absolutely right. I
The
100%
most
agree.
the most powerful person in America is not the president of the United States. It's the cop that pulled you over or the prosecutor who could put you in jail. Okay. Who the heck cares if we have an electric vehicle subsidy credit or not? That doesn't affect your life as much as being shot between the eyes by some cop. So, I mean, the fact is that there is not only is there corruption, but the real issue is there's nowhere to go to get it corrected, to get these obvious, blatant injustices corrected. And everybody in the government, don't want to open a can of worms. They don't want to do anything. I mean, the police want you to tattle. Oh, we need the public's help. Can you help? But they don't snitch on their own when they know that there's criminality in their own office. So there's this unwritten code in the government that I'm not going to
Right. They never expose their own, especially when they're the worst kind of
I'm
corrupt.
not going to say,
It's such a double standard. It's ridiculous. Rules for thee, but not for me.
Yeah, I'm not going to say you did anything wrong, but then you
Or
me.
how about this excuse? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. That's a civil matter.
Yeah.
Well, let me give you a story. What's the difference between civil fraud and criminal fraud? Have you ever seen those civil fraud settlements? Yoast signs those with some company. Okay, pay $1 million and we'll call. The elements of the offense are the same. Civil fraud and criminal fraud have the same, like wire fraud, have the same elements of the offense. So what's the difference? Whatever they want. They feel like making it civil. So they feel like saying, okay, Bank America, you can pay $5 million or $50 billion or whatever it is. But Stephen, you have to go to jail. So they do whatever they want to whoever they want. Now they couch it in this legality, but it's so discretionary that the reality is they do what they want. And there's nowhere to go to get redress or to get, that's the old fashioned America. The First Amendment isn't just what you can say what you want, but you can petition the government for redress. So when you see that have all these people that have suffered these unimaginable tragedies at the hands of the government, and then you can't go anywhere to get redress, it's ridiculous. By the way, the best thing going for this petition is the actions of law enforcement. I mean, they've single-handedly destroyed their credibility. I don't think people naturally hate.
Oh, they have. Absolutely. They have 100%. It's irreparable. They're never coming back from that. It's ridiculous. If they're so far gone, they're never going to recover from it. The media too. It's funny you should mention those Bank of America deals and wire fraud details because some of those details are very close to what actually happened in my case, quote unquote, and allegedly. So yeah, I thought that was ironic. But okay. Yeah, the bank too, by the way. But yeah, it's we have to have a chat one of these days off the air. We could probably learn a lot from you.
Anytime.
Tony, and I think you're absolutely right about the problem is there's nowhere to turn. Because in the probate trap that with my family, they were selling all of our property. My mom was gone for 3.5 years. We lost so much going into a probate court. We were forced into it. And there was nowhere to turn to. We went to legislators. They tried to help. We went to the police departments. We went to the attorney general. We went to everybody we could think of, and not one of them could help us. They even send us, or they would help us, or they would send us back to the probate court that was terrorizing us. That's the problem. There was no one being held accountable at all. Right. That's the problem.
Exactly. And that's why this qualified immunity cause is absolutely on point, and it's fantastic. It is the single magic bullet that can change something fundamentally. paying people that were wrongfully imprisoned $50 million doesn't change one thing. By the way, back to Dan Caceres, he's done the same stuff for 30 plus years. Mark Bennett too. They lost computers, sex with witnesses, missing money. This is the same tired playbook. These guys do this over and over again. The stuff that I experienced, and again, because of Dawn, I mean, we were able to document it. Plus, I have a really good attorney and a really good private investigator. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think that, you know, they normally play it straight, but they say, well, we don't like Tony, so we're going to go after him. This is just what they do. This is just what they do. And we're being brutalized. I mean, the threat to the country is the government. It's just crazy that they've treated us like this. It's terrible.
Yeah.
We're the remedy.
Mm.
Going to be the remedy, I should say.
We are the remedy. We've been the remedy. Slowly getting into the fringes of the. Started out with the fringe of the awareness of the human population. Now it's really out there, though. Obviously, because everybody can see that.
I know that
the media lying their ass off.
Yeah, I know a lot of the patriots, like all of my patriot groups, and that's growing. And they want to help. They want to help with getting signatures. Like they're going to hit the ground running. They're waiting. They are asking me, like, when are these petitions going to be, finalized where we can start getting signatures? So I think we're going to be successful this year. I know we are. We're going to be successful.
Pray with you, Allie. I believe
I pray and know that you will be.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Cynthia. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
No. Any more questions? We greatly appreciate you, Stephen, for hosting this for us.
Thank you.
We look forward to many more. You are the best.
Yeah, anytime. I'm building a
Thank you.
I
network.
want to thank our panel. Thank
people that are willing
Timmy,
to get this out there.
Jenny, Ally for their time. Everybody, because you could have been doing something else, but you were here tonight. So
Great date night.
yeah.
And thank you to all our viewers for joining us. It wouldn't be possible without you guys if you weren't actually watching our shows. And so without you guys, this wouldn't be here. So I wanted to thank our viewers as well. And until next time, we will be doing more frequent shows as needed, but preferably more frequently because we're ramping up our broadcasting schedule and hopefully going to make some shit go viral and expose the corruption around the world. Any final thoughts? Anybody before we wrap it up?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gratitude, everyone. Gratitude.
Grateful to all of you.
Good night, everybody.